Ancient trade routes are rewriting the history books. Entire civilizations, once erased by time, are now emerging from the shadows thanks to a revolutionary focus on their long-lost economic networks. This video uncovers 20 forgotten societies whose true power and global reach are only now being understood. We will travel from the heart of the Sahara to the islands of Southeast Asia, tracing the paths of salt, spices, and gems that connected our world. You will discover how a single Roman coin in a Viking grave or a piece of Chinese pottery in an African city can unravel a hidden history of human connection. By the end, you will see the medieval era not as a collection of isolated kingdoms, but as a vibrant, globalized web of cultures. How did a desert empire control the flow of African gold? What secrets lie beneath the ocean where a sea empire once thrived? This journey will fundamentally change how you see our shared past. What does it mean for a civilization to be truly lost, only to be found again in the artifacts it traded? A single silver coin, stamped with the profile of a Roman emperor, rests quietly in a Scandinavian burial mound. It is a silent witness to a journey of thousands of miles. This small piece of metal is more than just currency. It is a historical fingerprint, a tiny piece of a vast and invisible web that connected the Viking North with the Mediterranean South. For generations, our understanding of history was shaped by written records, the chronicles of kings and the dates of great battles. But what about the countless societies that left no such parchments behind? Their stories were waiting to be told not in libraries but in the ground through the everyday objects they bought, sold, and carried across the world. This is the power of studying trade networks. They reveal the hidden architecture of human connection, a unique style of pottery appearing in a distant port city, the chemical signature of metal linking an ore to a finished sword continents away, even the ancient seeds of a foreign crop found in a local rubbish pit. These are the clues. They speak of economic systems, of cultural exchange, and of political alliances that official histories often missed entirely. Take something as seemingly simple as a glass bead. The specific way it is colored and shaped acts like a cultural signature. By tracing the spread of a particular bead design from its origin point, archaeologists can now map a civilization's sphere of influence, revealing connections that stretched far beyond the borders drawn on any old map. To reconstruct these forgotten pathways, scholars are employing remarkable new tools. They use isotopic analysis, a technique that reads the unique chemical makeup of an artifact like a passport, revealing where the metal was mined or the glass was forged. They digitally map ancient trade winds and ocean currents, modeling the most likely routes a merchant ship would have taken. This methodological shift is profound. It moves us beyond the stories of palaces and onto the docks, into the marketplaces, and along the caravan trails. It shows us that the medieval world was not a collection of isolated villages, but a surprisingly globalized network built on the movement of goods, and with them, ideas. How might the history of your own hometown shift if you could trace the origin of the spices in an old market or the stone used to build its first church? By following these threads of commerce, we are finally unlocking the doors to societies once dismissed as peripheral, listening at last to the stories their trade has been telling us all along. Deep in the heart of the Libyan desert, a kingdom of cities once rose from the sands. The Garamantes were not the simple nomads of old historical accounts, but the master architects of a desert empire. Their power was built on a simple, brilliant strategy. They controlled the only viable paths across the world's largest desert. Imagine the value of a single commodity like salt in a time before refrigeration. For the Garamantes, salt was white gold, and they commanded its journey north from the mines of Central Africa, while simultaneously funneling Mediterranean goods and African gold back and forth across the dunes. This was not random barter, it was a state-controlled economic system. Archaeological evidence reveals a startling picture. Roman glass and pottery have been found in the ruins of Garamantian towns, proving they were not isolated but were key trading partners with one of history's greatest empires. They built fortified outposts to protect their caravan routes, clear signs of a centralized authority with the resources to project its power across a vast and unforgiving landscape. But how does a civilization sustain itself in such a place? The answer lies beneath the ground. The Garamantes engineered an incredible network of underground tunnels, called fagaras, to tap into ancient fossil water reserves. This water, stored for millennia, was pumped to the surface to create lush agricultural oases. These green havens allowed them to grow grains and dates, supporting permanent towns that became bustling hubs of commerce and craft production. Their story completely rewrites our understanding of the medieval world. We are often taught to look for centers of power along coastlines or river valleys, but the Garamantes show us that a desert could be a dynamic crossroads. The Sahara was not an empty barrier dividing continents, it was a bridge, and the Garamantes were its toll keepers. Their forgotten civilization challenges us to look beyond the map's familiar centers and to find the hidden networks that truly connected our world. While the Garamantes mastered the desert, another empire commanded the sea. The Srivijaya Empire was a thalassocracy, a realm where power flowed not from castles on hills, but from control over the ocean's busiest highways. Its domain was the strategic straits of Southeast Asia, the narrow sea passages every merchant ship sailing between China and India was forced to navigate. For centuries, this maritime superpower was little more than a legend mentioned in scattered texts, a ghost kingdom that seemed to have vanished without a trace. Its rediscovery did not come from unearthing a grand palace, but from piecing together a puzzle of traded goods. Chinese ceramics, Sumatran tree resins used for incense, and Javanese spices found in ports across the region all pointed to a single, dominant network centered on the island of Sumatra. Srivijaya grew immensely wealthy by imposing taxes on the priceless cargoes moving through its waters. Spices, silks, and exotic woods all paid a toll to this gatekeeper of the seas, financing a vibrant and cosmopolitan society. Its main port cities became bustling hubs where Buddhist monks, Chinese merchants, and Malay sailors exchanged not only goods but also ideas, scripts, and religious beliefs. This was an empire built on water, and its capital, Palembang, was a marvel of aquatic adaptation. Recent archaeological work suggests the city was constructed largely on rafts and houses built on stilts along the Musi River, a floating metropolis that lived and breathed with the tides. Finding its physical remains has been a challenge, as much of its legacy lies submerged in silt and water, a testament to its intimate connection with the sea. The story of Srivijaya fundamentally challenges our idea of what an empire looks like. It proves that influence does not always require vast tracts of farmland and legions of soldiers. Sometimes the greatest power lies in controlling a critical point on the map, a geographical bottleneck that everyone must pass through. This sea empire left few towering stone monuments for us to find. Instead, its history is written in the pottery scattered across the ocean floor and echoed in the trade routes that still shape global commerce today. Those towering obelisks in the Ethiopian highlands are not just monuments to local kings, they are landmarks of a global empire. The Kingdom of Axum was a commercial titan, its influence stretching from the heart of Africa to the shores of India. For centuries, its true scale was underestimated, but the silent testimony of its coins is now rewriting its history. Axumite currency, stamped with the faces of its kings and Christian crosses, has been found scattered across the Red Sea region and deep into the Indian Ocean. The distribution of these coins acts like a map charting the reach of Axumite merchants. They were not just trading locally, they were operating a sophisticated financial system that rivaled those of Rome and Persia, a system that facilitated the exchange of the world's most coveted goods. From the African interior came ivory, tortoiseshell, and the brilliant green of emeralds carried to Axum's bustling ports. In return, ships arrived bearing silk from China, spices from Southeast Asia, and finely crafted steel. Axum sat at the perfect geographical crossroads, a mandatory stop for any vessel moving between the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean, and it grew immensely wealthy from this traffic. The evidence for this maritime power is no longer just theoretical. Archaeologists have uncovered Axumite pottery and distinct artifacts in South India and Sri Lanka, a clear signal that their ships were making the long and dangerous journey across the open ocean. This was not a passive kingdom waiting for goods to arrive. It was an active sea power with its own fleet of robust vessels, capable of navigating the monsoon winds to forge direct links with distant civilizations. What makes Axum so remarkable is how it balanced this global engagement with a powerful, unique identity. It developed its own script, Jade, one of the few ancient writing systems in Africa to be used for both royal inscriptions and everyday trade. It adopted Christianity early, creating a distinct cultural and religious center that was nonetheless deeply interwoven with international networks. The story of Axum completely dismantles the outdated idea of an isolated, inward-looking Africa. Here was a kingdom that was a genuine peer to Rome and Persia, a central player in the first wave of globalization whose economic voice echoed across 3 continents. Its legacy, written in stone and scattered in coin, reminds us that some of history's most influential hubs of power were found in places we are only now beginning to fully appreciate. The brilliant white domes of Anuradhapura's dagobas were more than just places of worship, they were landmarks for a global economy. This ancient Sri Lankan capital was a spiritual beacon, but its true lifeblood flowed from the sea. While pilgrims came for enlightenment, merchants arrived for riches, and the kingdom's wealth was built on exports that captivated the ancient world. Its ports shipped out the deep blue of sapphires, luminous pearls, fragrant cinnamon, and even live elephants, creatures of immense prestige for royal courts from Rome to China. The discovery of Roman coins and a distinctive type of pottery known as rouleted ware at these sites acts as a trail of breadcrumbs, marking the footsteps of traders who saw this island not as a remote destination, but as a central node in a vast commercial network. This was no accidental stop. The kingdom's position was geographically perfect. Ancient mariners learned to harness the powerful, predictable monsoon winds, and their ships, laden with goods, would inevitably be drawn to the safe harbors of Sri Lanka's coast. It became a mandatory layover, a place to wait for the winds to change, repair vessels, and most importantly, to trade. The kingdom's rulers understood this advantage perfectly. They invested in massive port structures, warehouses, and the famous inland reservoirs that supported the urban population and the industries feeding this maritime trade. The economy was not just sustained by local farms, but by the constant flow of goods and currency from across the ocean. This commercial activity was inextricably linked with the spread of ideas, particularly Buddhism. As merchants moved, so did monks and religious texts. The same ships that carried gems to foreign lands also carried Buddhist scriptures, art, and philosophical concepts, helping transform Anuradhapura into one of the world's great centers of Buddhist learning. The trade routes became conduits for faith, with religious expansion and commercial ambition fueling one another in a powerful, symbiotic relationship. Archaeological work on ancient shipwrecks off the coast continues to reveal this story, with cargoes of foreign goods found alongside personal items from diverse cultures, painting a picture of a bustling, cosmopolitan maritime world. The legacy of Anuradhapura forces us to reconsider the very idea of an island. It was not an isolated entity, but a vibrant, connected hub whose influence rippled across the Indian Ocean. Its story shows that true power in the medieval world could come from controlling not just land, but a critical point of rest and exchange on the world's most vital sea lanes. How many other island nations, now seen as peripheral, were once the beating hearts of forgotten global networks, far from the familiar river valleys? A network of fortified towns once stood against the stark deserts of Central Asia. The Oxus Civilization, a culture known to archaeologists as the Bactria-Margiana archaeological complex, was long a puzzle of scattered artifacts, but we now see it for what it was, a critical trading hub on the earliest version of the Silk Road. This was not a backwater, it was a central exchange point for the most vital commodities of the Bronze Age. From the mountains of Afghanistan came deep blue lapis lazuli, a stone prized by kings and priests in distant Mesopotamia for making brilliant pigments and sacred jewelry. More crucially, the Oxus people controlled the flow of tin, an element absolutely essential for producing bronze, the alloy that defined the era. Their strategic position allowed them to connect the great powers of their time, creating a continental network long before the famous Silk Road caravans ever began their journeys. The evidence for this sophisticated trade society is etched into small, everyday objects. Excavations have uncovered carefully carved seals used to mark ownership of goods and sets of standardized weights. These weights prove the existence of a regulated market system, a place where value was measured and trust was established between people from vastly different cultures. In the same ancient towns, artifacts appear that show a remarkable cultural fusion, pottery styles echoing the Indus Valley, cylinder seals inspired by Mesopotamia, and metalworking techniques from the Eurasian steppes. This was a true melting pot, a society of traders and artisans who acted as cultural translators, bridging the East and the West. Their wealth, generated by this global trade, funded a unique and complex society. They built impressive fortified centers with monumental architecture, including elaborate temples that suggest a powerful religious class. These structures point to a social hierarchy capable of organizing large labor forces, all supported by the profits from the caravans that moved through their lands. The very existence of the Oxus civilization forces a dramatic rewrite of early history. We have long been taught that urban life and complex economies could only emerge along great rivers like the Tigris, Euphrates, or Indus. But here, in the arid heart of Central Asia, was a cradle of innovation and connection. Its rediscovery through the trail of its trade goods places it at the very center of a Bronze Age world system, a forgotten link that helped shape the ancient world. The pyramids of Meroe stand as sharp silhouettes against the Sudan sky, a distinct echo of a civilization that forged its own path. For too long, this Nubian kingdom was viewed as a distant shadow of its Egyptian neighbor, but the truth is far more compelling. Meroe was a powerhouse in its own right, a kingdom whose economic engine roared with the fires of industry. Its true wealth came from a mastery of iron production, a technological advantage that fueled its rise. The kingdom's workshops produced high-quality tools and weapons, but its most famous exports were the treasures of Inner Africa: gold, dark ebony wood, and gleaming ivory, all funneled north along the Nile. This was not a simple exchange, it was a sophisticated commercial operation. The discovery of Meroitic pottery along the Red Sea coast and Roman artifacts, including fine glass and silver, within Meroe's own cities confirms a dynamic two-way trade relationship. They were not passive recipients of Mediterranean culture, they were active participants in a long-distance economic network, trading on their own terms. This independent spirit is carved into their very identity. The Meroites developed their own written script, a language that still holds its secrets, waiting to be fully understood by modern scholars. Their religious life was a unique blend, merging powerful African deities with Egyptian and Hellenistic gods, creating a pantheon that reflected their position at a cultural crossroads. This synthesis shows a society confident enough to absorb outside influences while maintaining a powerful, distinct sense of self. The kingdom's strategic genius lay in its control of geography. It commanded the vital north-south artery of the Nile, taxing the flow of goods from tropical Africa to the Roman world. Simultaneously, it managed the east-west caravan routes that connected the Nile Valley to ports on the Red Sea, creating a direct link to the Indian Ocean's bustling trade. This dual control made Meroe an indispensable middleman, a position of immense leverage. The evidence suggests they negotiated with Rome not as a subordinate, but as a respected equal, a powerful African state that understood its own economic value. The legacy of Meroe forces us to reconsider the entire map of ancient power. It was not a peripheral kingdom, but a central hub whose influence resonated from the heart of Africa to the forums of Rome. Its story, written in iron, gold, and an undeciphered script, reminds us that some of history's most formidable players built their empires not just on conquest, but on controlling the very routes of connection. A merchant's personal letter, found sealed in a forgotten watchtower, speaks of a horse deal in Samarkand and a debt owed in Chang'an. It is written not in Chinese or Persian, but in Sogdian, the common tongue of commerce along the Silk Road. This single document opens a window onto a civilization built not on borders or armies, but on connection. The Sogdians were the ultimate networkers, an Iranian people from the cities of Central Asia who wove an economic web across the entire medieval world. Their power did not come from a single emperor's decree, but from thousands of individual contracts, from trusted relationships stretching from the Byzantine Empire to the Chinese court. They established thriving trading colonies in every major city along the route, creating a diaspora that functioned as a single, vast, and incredibly efficient commercial machine. These colonies were more than just merchant quarters, they were cultural embassies. A Sogdian community in a Chinese capital like Chang'an would have its own temples, its own customs, and its own leaders who negotiated directly with the emperor. They were the indispensable middlemen, the bankers who financed caravans, the diplomats who smoothed over political tensions, and the translators who made sure a deal struck in one language was honored in another. Their mastery of logistics was legendary. They organized and guided the great camel caravans across the most dangerous stretch of the entire Silk Road, the Taklamakan Desert. This was a sea of sand so treacherous its name was said to mean you go in, but you will not come out. The Sogdians knew its oases, its shifting dunes, and the precise timing needed to survive its extremes. They did not just move silk and spices, they moved faith. A Sogdian merchant caravan was a conduit for ideas, carrying Buddhist sutras from India into Central Asia, bringing Manichaean and Nestorian Christian texts all the way to China. Tomb paintings found in China depict Sogdian traders not only with their goods, but engaged in religious ceremonies, showing how their commercial journeys were inseparable from their role as missionaries of culture. The real evidence of their influence is not in grand palaces, but in these intimate details: a marriage contract found in a fortress, a mural showing a wine festival, a ledger detailing the sale of a famous Fergana horse. These fragments reveal a society where art, religion, and commerce were woven into a single tapestry of life. The Sogdian story forces us to ask what truly defines a civilization. They built no single monumental empire, yet their cultural and economic footprint shaped Eurasia for centuries. Their legacy is a powerful reminder that the connections between places can be just as influential as the places themselves, and that the most enduring impact sometimes belongs not to the conquerors but to the connectors. The Sogdians built their network on trust and contracts, but in the humid Mekong Delta, a civilization engineered its power directly into the landscape. Vast canals, some over 100 kilometers long, once cut through the swampland, transforming a waterlogged plain into the heart of the Funan polity. These were not simple irrigation ditches, they were the superhighways of their time, a meticulously planned aquatic network that connected inland settlements to bustling ocean ports. For centuries, Funan was known only from classical Chinese texts that described it as a fabulously wealthy maritime kingdom. Now, advanced LiDAR surveys, which use lasers to map the ground beneath dense vegetation, have revealed the staggering scale of this hydraulic civilization, confirming its role as the vital trading hub between India and China. Imagine a merchant ship from the Roman world, its hull filled with Mediterranean goods. It would dock at a Funan port like Archipelago, where its cargo was unloaded onto smaller boats. These boats would then navigate the intricate canal system, carrying exotic wares deep into the interior, while local treasures like aromatic woods, kingfisher feathers, and rhinoceros horn were gathered for the return journey. This was not just trade, it was a sophisticated transshipment operation, and Funan controlled every step. The kingdom's wealth allowed it to import entire cultural systems. Indian religions like Hinduism and Buddhism, along with artistic styles and concepts of kingship, were adopted and adapted by Funan's elite, creating a unique cultural blend that would shape Southeast Asia for centuries. The physical proof of this global connection is stunning. Archaeologists have unearthed Roman medallions and shards of Persian pottery at Archipelago, silent witnesses to trade routes that stretched all the way to the Mediterranean. Funan was likely less a single, centralized empire and more a collection of powerful port cities bound together by shared commercial interests and a common culture. Its discovery completely rewrites the timeline of the region, proving that complex maritime societies flourished here centuries earlier than previously believed. The canals were the very arteries of its power, a physical manifestation of a civilization that understood its strength lay not in conquering vast territories, but in mastering the flow of goods and ideas across the water. The rivalry with Egypt was only one part of the Kushite story. Beneath the shadow of their northern neighbor, the Kingdom of Kush cultivated a vast and overlooked network stretching deep into the African continent. While their interactions with Egypt are well documented, a quieter but more vital trade flowed from the south, a current of wealth that secured their power for centuries. New studies of artifacts from Kushite sites reveal fragments of exotic hardwoods, the remnants of rare animal skins, and distinct styles of iron tools that point to routes extending far beyond the Nile. These clues suggest trade connections that may have reached the resource-rich regions near the Great Lakes, thousands of kilometers to the south. Kush positioned itself as the essential conduit, channeling the treasures of Inner Africa, including ebony, ivory, and other valuable goods, northward to the Mediterranean market. This was not a minor side business, it was the foundation of their enduring economy. Their legendary mastery of iron production provided a crucial advantage in this exchange. The massive slag heaps near Meroe, hills of waste material from ancient smelting, are not just industrial debris, they are monuments to a technological powerhouse. Kush produced high-quality iron tools and weapons on an industrial scale, goods that were highly sought after both within Africa and beyond, giving them a powerful commodity to trade for the raw materials flowing from the south. This southern focus was the key to their remarkable resilience. Long after the power of pharaonic Egypt waned, the Kingdom of Kush continued to thrive. Its prosperity was not solely dependent on its northern neighbor, but was rooted in its own continent, spanning commercial relationships. By re-evaluating these trade priorities, we see a civilization that skillfully balanced two worlds. It absorbed influences from the Mediterranean while maintaining deep, foundational ties to its African heritage. This dual perspective reveals a far more complex and self-sufficient society, a kingdom that looked south to secure its future, ensuring its legacy would be written not only in stone, but in the enduring flow of trade across a continent. The city of Tiwanaku, with its monumental Sun Gate, was not an isolated sanctuary in the high Andes. Its true power radiated outward through a web of connections that defied the world's most extreme geography. Archaeologists tracing the spread of a specific style of pottery and the distinctive tools for ceremonial snuff have mapped a sphere of influence stretching from the Pacific coast to the Amazonian rainforest. This was not a random scattering of similar objects, but the clear signature of a sophisticated trade network. The empire mastered a system known as the vertical archipelago, a brilliant economic strategy for a mountainous world. They established colonies in different ecological zones, creating a controlled circuit of exchange. From the highlands came freeze-dried llama meat, warm wool, and hardy potatoes. In return, coastal colonies sent dried fish and maize, while lowland outposts provided stimulating coca leaves and the brilliantly colored feathers of tropical birds. Each product was essential, and Tiwanaku controlled the flow. The cultural glue that held this network together is visible in the art. The same stern, individualized human faces, the so-called portrait heads, appear on ceramics and textiles across this vast region. These were not generic designs, they represented a shared identity, a common set of beliefs and status symbols that were disseminated through trade. Possessing a Tiwanaku-style textile or snuff tray was a sign of connection to a wider, prestigious world. This reveals a different model of empire building, one where economic integration and the exchange of prestige goods cemented political alliances as effectively as military force. The story of Tiwanaku, pieced together from its scattered material culture, shows us a civilization that turned environmental fragmentation into its greatest strength, weaving a tapestry of interconnected societies across the roof of the world. A vast network of canals once turned the scorching Sonoran Desert into a green oasis. This was the domain of the Hohokam, a people whose true story is not written in grand stone cities, but in the intricate patterns of shell jewelry and the sprawling lines of their irrigation ditches. For a long time, they were labeled as simple farmers, but the objects they traded tell a far more ambitious tale. Their artisans mastered a remarkable technique, using a natural acid from cactus fruit to etch intricate designs into shells brought from the distant Pacific coast. These beautiful ornaments were not just for local use, they became prized trade items, traveling hundreds of miles across the desert. The Hohokam also constructed large, oval ball courts, strikingly similar to those found deep in Mesoamerica. The discovery of these courts, alongside the remains of colorful macaw feathers and copper bells from Mexico, paints a picture of a vibrant cultural and economic bridge. They were not an isolated society, they were the critical middlemen in a continental exchange network. Through their hands passed the brilliant blue of turquoise from northern mines, the vibrant feathers of tropical parrots, and the unique sound of copper bells connecting the sophisticated cultures of Mexico with the emerging Puebloan communities to the north. This long-distance trade was the engine of their resilience. Their ability to flourish in one of North America's harshest environments was tied directly to their success in moving non-agricultural goods. The wealth generated from this exchange funded the construction of large platform mounds and the development of a complex society with its own calendar and social hierarchy. The rediscovery of the Hohokam's vast trade scope forces a complete rethinking of pre-Columbian North America. It was not a continent of isolated, inward-looking communities, but a land woven together by threads of commerce, where a desert civilization could thrive by mastering the art of connection. A Sumerian poem sings of a land where the sun rises, a pure and sacred place free from illness and sorrow. This mythical paradise modern archaeology suggests was the very real Dilmun civilization, an island kingdom whose power was built not on conquest, but on its indispensable role as a neutral harbor. For centuries, Dilmun was known primarily for its sprawling fields of burial mounds, silent hills that spoke of a dense and prosperous population. But the true story of this civilization is now being told by the artifacts of commerce, not the rituals of the afterlife. Dilmun's genius lay in its position, perfectly situated between the copper mines of Oman and the insatiable markets of Mesopotamia. It became the trusted middleman, the safe port where goods from the Indus Valley, like intricately carved seals and exotic materials, were transferred to Mesopotamian merchants. In this exchange, Dilmun took its share, amassing wealth not by producing the goods itself, but by mastering the logistics of their movement. The evidence for this is scattered across the seafloor and buried in ancient warehouses. A single Indus Valley seal found in a Dilmun temple, a Mesopotamian cylinder seal in a local merchant's home. These objects are the receipts of a vast, ancient enterprise. They reveal a commercial sphere that stretched across the Persian Gulf, with distinctive Dilmun-type pottery acting as a cultural signature wherever their ships docked. This generated wealth was not hoarded, it was invested in the land. The civilization engineered sophisticated freshwater irrigation systems, tapping into the island's natural springs to create lush, productive gardens in the arid climate, a practical echo of the mythical paradise. Their material culture became a unique blend, adopting and adapting styles from all their partners while maintaining a distinct local identity. This was not a simple stopover for tired sailors. It was a sophisticated political entity that understood its power came from connection. By providing a secure, neutral ground for exchange, Dilmun ensured its own prosperity for centuries, proving that an island's true strength could lie in being a bridge between worlds, a peaceful hub in a bustling Bronze Age economy. Northern black polished where pottery gleams with an almost metallic sheen, a luxury good whose discovery far from the Ganga Valley redraws our map of ancient India. This was not simple cookware, but a status symbol, its elegant forms and brilliant finish signaling wealth and connection. The trail of these ceramic fragments, found from the fertile plains of the Ganges all the way to the high Deccan Plateau and even across the sea in Sri Lanka, marks the arteries of an extensive internal trade system. This network was the lifeblood of the Mahajanapadas, those great realms that flourished along the riverbanks centuries before the great empires. Their power was not just rooted in the soil, but in the flow of goods along the sacred rivers. These waterways were the ancient equivalents of modern highways, carrying essential commodities that fueled urban life. Salt from coastal marshes, surplus grain from fertile fields, strong timber from the forests, and valuable metals from distant mines all moved along these liquid roads. This constant exchange allowed for remarkable economic specialization. A town could focus entirely on producing fine textiles, knowing it could trade its cloth for salt and metal from another settlement upstream. This specialization was the engine of urban growth, transforming clusters of huts into bustling, diverse cities. The system was so sophisticated it required a new technology of trust, the punch-marked coin. These early pieces of stamped silver, among the first coins in the world, have been found scattered across the entire region. Their standardized use tells us that value was no longer just a matter of barter, but was now measured in a commonly accepted currency. This was a true monetary economy, a revolutionary development that greased the wheels of commerce over a vast area. Re-examining this era through the lens of trade fundamentally shifts our understanding. The story of early India is less about the isolated rise of kingdoms and more about the interconnected growth of a commercial ecosystem. The wealth that would later fund vast empires was first accumulated not just in royal treasuries, but in the warehouses of merchants and the workshops of master artisans. These individuals, whose names are lost to history, were the true architects of India's first urban landscape. Their networks of exchange created the economic foundation for everything that followed, proving that the most enduring legacies are often built not by conquest but by connection. A queen of Egypt sent ships south on a mission for divine luxury. The Land of Punt was so central to Egyptian identity that its exotic goods were carved into temple walls, yet its exact location faded into myth. For centuries, scholars debated whether this fabled source of wealth was in Arabia or deep within Africa. The answer, it turns out, was preserved in the tombs themselves. Recent scientific analysis of mummified baboons dedicated to Egyptian gods has traced their origin to a specific region in the Horn of Africa. Similarly, studies of ebony logs found in royal burial chambers point toward the same coastal area, likely in modern-day Eritrea or Somalia. This was not a land conquered by Egyptian armies, but a powerful partner reached by ambitious seafaring expeditions. The famous reliefs at Queen Hatshepsut's temple depict a fascinating scene: Puntite villages built on stilts over the water, and their leader, a man of considerable stature named Parahu, who stands beside his wife in a pose of dignified equality. The Egyptians did not portray them as subdued subjects, but as respected counterparts in a grand commercial exchange. What made this relationship so vital was the nature of the goods. From Punt came frankincense and myrrh, fragrant resins that were the lifeblood of Egyptian religion, essential for temple rituals and the preservation of sacred remains. They also traded in live leopards, giraffes, and baboons for the royal court, along with the precious ebony and gold that symbolized eternal power. These were not mere luxuries, they were the materials that upheld the pharaoh's divine authority and connected the Egyptian state to the gods. The enduring mystery of Punt demonstrates a profound truth. A civilization that left no written history of its own can have its story resurrected through the desires of its trading partners. The silent testimony of a baboon's bone or the grain of a piece of wood can illuminate a sophisticated society that thrived on the African coast, a forgotten kingdom whose wealth and influence resonated through the greatest empire of the ancient world. High in the Andes, a different kind of empire was being woven together, one stitch at a time. The Wari Empire, a contemporary of Tiwanaku, mastered the harsh Peruvian highlands not just with soldiers, but with sprawling roadways and standardized goods. Their distinctive polychrome ceramics, with their bold geometric patterns, are more than just beautiful artifacts. They are the calling cards of a sophisticated administrative system, found in distant valleys and coastal settlements far from the Wari capital. This was a strategy of economic integration on a grand scale. The empire established a network of provincial centers, strategically placed to collect and redistribute essential goods from diverse ecological zones. Maize from warmer valleys, freeze-dried potatoes from the high plains, and dried llama meat from the pastoral highlands were all funneled through this state-controlled system, supporting a growing class of administrators and artisans. This flow of staples was the true lifeblood of Wari power, stabilizing regions and creating a shared economic dependency that bound distant communities to the imperial core. Their road network was the skeleton of this entire enterprise. Long before the Inca carved their famous highways into the mountainside, the Wari were engineering their own extensive pathways. These were not mere trails, but carefully constructed roads that connected the highlands to the coast, enabling the swift movement of imperial messengers, military units, and most importantly, the trade caravans that sustained the entire system. The discovery of Wari-style textiles and pottery in regions they never formally conquered reveals a subtle truth. Their influence often spread through economic and cultural ties that were as powerful as any military campaign. A local leader adopting Wari drinking vessels for feasts was signaling an alliance, a connection to a wider, more prestigious world of exchange. This reinterpretation transforms the Wari from a mysterious prelude to the Inca into a fully fledged empire in their own right. They were the pioneers of a model of statecraft that would come to define the Andes, proving that the most enduring control often comes not from subjugation, but from making your economy indispensable to everyone else. How does an empire build loyalty? For the Wari, the answer was found in a full stomach and a shared ceramic style, connecting a vast and rugged landscape into one interconnected realm. These delicate terracotta heads with their piercing eyes and elaborate braids are more than just art. They are fragments of a lost economic language. The Nok culture of central Nigeria, famous for its stunning sculptures, is slowly revealing its secrets not through written records, but through the silent testimony of its iron and clay. For a long time, these figures were seen as the products of an isolated, brilliant society. Now, a closer look at their context suggests they were part of something much larger. The Nok were among the earliest people in sub-Saharan Africa to master ironworking, a technology they appear to have developed independently. This was not a small-scale craft. The remains of their furnaces point to large-scale production. What were they doing with all that iron? The tools and weapons they produced would have been immensely valuable, not just for local use but as potential trade goods. The intricate jewelry and hairstyles depicted on the sculptures themselves offer another clue. They show a society with clear social stratification, where status was displayed through personal adornment. This level of artistic sophistication and social complexity requires more than just local resources. It suggests access to materials, ideas, and perhaps even trade partners that fueled their cultural development. While direct proof of long-distance caravans is still emerging, archaeologists note the presence of raw materials in Nok sites that are not native to their region. This hints at a web of internal exchange, a network that moved goods across West Africa. It is not a huge leap to consider that this network could have had tentacles reaching north, connecting with the fringes of the trans-Saharan trade that would later flourish. The Nok did not need to be a vast empire to be influential. Their mastery of ironworking and their complex social organization may have laid the very foundation for the legendary kingdoms of Ghana and Mali that would rise centuries later. Their story challenges an old and persistent narrative that sub-Saharan Africa was a silent continent, disconnected from the wider world until much later periods. The Nok culture speaks to us through its art, asking us to look past the beautiful surfaces and see the potential connections humming beneath. What other civilizations are waiting for their trade networks to be discovered? ready to provide the missing context for their masterpieces. The colossal stone heads of the Olmec gaze out from the jungle with an ancient and inscrutable authority. Yet these monumental sculptures are only the most visible part of a story written in more delicate materials, a story of connections that shaped a continent. New research is mapping the reach of this mother culture not by its grandest monuments, but by the trail of its most prized possessions, distinctive Olmec ceramics, polished iron ore mirrors that reflected the shaman's vision, and above all, the brilliant blue jade unique to the mountains of Guatemala have been found scattered across vast distances. The Olmec did not just appreciate this jade, they required it for their most sacred rituals, creating a powerful economic demand that pulled distant regions into their orbit. This was not haphazard barter, but a managed system. At their great center of San Lorenzo, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of dedicated workshops, areas where artisans mass-produced certain types of celts and figurines, likely intended specifically for trade. This suggests an economy sophisticated enough to include planned production for export, a level of organization rarely credited to such an ancient society. The true legacy of the Olmec network, however, lies not in the objects themselves, but in the ideas they carried. The same trade routes that moved jade from Guatemala also carried the fundamental concepts that would come to define Mesoamerica for millennia. The ritual ballgame, with its profound cosmic symbolism, the intricate calendar system used to track sacred time, and the very notion of a ruler as a shaman who could communicate with the spirit world, all these core ideologies appear to have been disseminated through Olmec economic channels. Their trade network became a cultural bloodstream, pumping a shared set of beliefs and practices across a diverse landscape. This reveals a profound truth about the birth of complex societies. The exchange of goods and the exchange of ideas are not separate processes, but two sides of the same coin. The Olmec did not necessarily conquer their neighbors with armies, but they profoundly influenced them through commerce, acting as the catalytic spark that set the entire course of Mesoamerican history in motion. A Phoenician merchant ship was not just a vessel, it was a floating warehouse of cultural revolution. While the cities of Tyre and Sidon were famous power centers, the true genius of the Phoenician system lay in its sprawling web of Western colonies. These were not simple supply stations for homesick sailors, but vibrant, independent city-states like Carthage, Gadara in Spain, and Lixus in North Africa. They formed a decentralized but deeply interconnected network that fundamentally reshaped the economy of the ancient Mediterranean. The reinterpretation of ancient shipwrecks tells a new story. Cargoes are not just random assortments of goods, they reveal a sophisticated commercial strategy. Amphoras, the ceramic jars used for transporting wine and oil, act like ancient barcodes, their shapes and clay compositions tracing a map of production and consumption that linked the Atlantic coast of Africa to the islands of Sardinia and Sicily. This network dealt in high-value, transformative goods. There was the legendary Tyrian purple dye, a color so rare and vibrant it became synonymous with royalty, painstakingly extracted from sea snails. There was transparent glass, a technological marvel, and strong wines that became staples of trade. But most importantly, there were metals, especially silver from Spanish mines and tin from as far away as Britain, the essential ingredients for the Bronze Age economy. The Phoenicians were the unparalleled masters of the sea lanes, their navigation skills allowing them to traverse the open ocean beyond the sight of land. Their most profound export, however, was not a material good but a system of record-keeping, the Phoenician alphabet. This was not created for epic poetry, but for practicality, for drafting contracts, tracking inventories, and recording debts. Its simplicity and efficiency made it the perfect tool of commerce, and it spread like wildfire along their trade routes, evolving into the Greek and later Latin scripts that form the basis of most modern writing. This perspective forces a dramatic shift in how we view their legacy. We often focus on the single city of Carthage and its epic wars with Rome, but the broader Phoenician achievement was the creation of a truly interconnected Mediterranean world centuries before Alexander the Great. Their power was not in a centralized empire with a single ruler, but in a resilient and adaptable diaspora of city-states, a network so robust that when the homeland fell, the Western colonies thrived. Their trade network laid the indispensable cultural and economic groundwork for the entire classical world that followed, a silent partnership that made the glory of Greece and the power of Rome possible. How many other foundational systems began not with a crown, but with a contract written in an alphabet designed for commerce? The shimmer of Roman glass has been found frozen in the tombs of the Mongolian steppe. For centuries, the Xiongnu Confederacy was remembered through the fearful chronicles of their rivals, depicted as a relentless tide of nomadic raiders. But the artifacts they took to their final resting places tell a far different story. These were not simple plunderers, they were the masterful architects of a steppe empire, whose true capital was not a city, but the trade route itself. Their burial mounds have yielded a stunning inventory of global connection, Chinese silks lying beside Persian carpets and delicate glassware from the Roman world. This was not random loot, but the curated wealth of a sophisticated middleman economy. The Xiongnu skillfully played a geopolitical game, extracting vast amounts of tribute, including precious goods and even marriage alliances from a defensive Han China. They did not merely consume these treasures, they became their primary distributors, funneling Chinese silks and luxury items north to the forest peoples of Siberia and west to the cultures of Central Asia. In return, they gained furs, horses, and loyalty, weaving a continental web that operated parallel to the Southern Silk Road. This economic system supported a remarkably stratified society with a mobile political center, a court that could move across the grasslands. Their artisans produced exquisite goldwork and metalware, a unique artistic fusion that blended the animal style of the Scythians with Chinese motifs and their own local genius. This was the material culture of a confident people who saw themselves as equals to the great settled empires. Their power was not rooted in controlling land, but in controlling movement. They commanded the flow of people, ideas, and goods across the vastness of the Eurasian steppes, a form of empire that was fluid, adaptive, and incredibly effective. This new interpretation, built on the evidence of trade, completely transforms our understanding. The Xiongnu were not mindless barbarians, they were savvy political and economic actors who built a lasting confederacy by mastering the art of connection. Their legacy reveals a critical truth. The Silk Road was not a single path, but a network of branches, and the northern route through the steppe was just as vital for binding the medieval world together. The stone houses of Kilwa were built from the very sea, their pale coral rag walls catching the morning sun. For a long time, the grandeur of these Swahili coast cities was misunderstood, their origins credited solely to foreign merchants from across the Indian Ocean. But the archaeology of trade tells a different story. These were not colonial outposts, but independent African city-states that mastered the rhythm of the monsoon winds. Each year, the winds blew south, bringing ships from Arabia, India, and even China to their harbors. And each year, the winds reversed, carrying the unique wealth of the African interior out into the world. This was a globalization powered by nature's clock. The city-states, from Mogadishu to Sofala, became the vital link between the continental interior and the vast maritime network. Their merchants organized the caravans that brought ivory, gold, and rare hardwoods from the inland kingdoms to the coast, where they were exchanged for fine Chinese celadon porcelain, vibrant Indian cotton textiles, and glazed pottery from the Persian Gulf. This exchange generated staggering wealth that built the Great Mosque of Kilwa with its intricate dome and the Husuni Kubwa Palace, a sprawling complex with over 100 rooms. The Swahili language itself is a living artifact of this fusion, a Bantu language enriched with Arabic loanwords born from the marketplace and the dock, where deals were struck and cultures merged. These were profoundly cosmopolitan centers where a shared Muslim faith connected African elites, Arab ship captains, and Persian scholars, creating a new and distinct Swahili identity. To walk the streets of these ancient towns was to hear a symphony of languages and see a blend of architectural styles, all unified under the African sun. This reinterpretation is crucial. It restores the agency of these city-states, revealing them not as passive recipients of foreign culture, but as the dynamic architects of their own destiny. Their story is one of a civilization that looked outward, harnessing the power of the ocean to build a unique world of stone and trade, a testament to what can be built at the intersection of continents. These recurring patterns across continents and centuries reveal a fundamental truth about human societies. Their greatest strength often lies in their ability to connect. From desert caravans to monsoon-driven ships, the most successful civilizations were those that mastered their environment not to build walls, but to build bridges. They transformed geographical barriers into economic superhighways. A desert became a controlled corridor for salt and gold, a treacherous strait became a toll booth for spices, and a windswept island became a mandatory layover for global shipping. The control of a single critical resource, whether it was the iron of Kush, the tin of the Oxus, or the incense of Punt, provided a lever of influence that could move the world. This was an economy of essentials where value was measured in ritual, technology, and survival, but these trade routes carried far more than merchandise. They were the original information superhighways, transmitting the blueprint for new technologies like ironworking, the sacred texts of new faiths like Buddhism and Islam, and the artistic styles that would define entire cultural epochs. The alphabet we use today, the religious beliefs that shape nations, and the very calendar on our walls all traveled along these ancient networks of exchange. This new perspective, pieced together from coins, pottery, and plant seeds, fundamentally rewrites our historical map. It asks us to look beyond the traditional centers of power, the Romes and the Chinas, and to appreciate the vibrant dynamism of the so-called peripheries. The Sahara, the steppe, and the Indonesian archipelago were not backwaters. They were the bustling crossroads where the medieval world was truly made. A piece of obsidian from a single volcano could end up in tools scattered across 3 continents, and a style of pottery could tell a story of cultural fusion more eloquently than any royal chronicle. This interconnected past holds a clear mirror to our own globalized present. We too live in a world defined by networks, by the flow of data, goods, and ideas across invisible digital highways. Understanding that this is not a new phenomenon but a deeply rooted human pattern allows us to see history not as a series of isolated events, but as a vast and intricate web of relationships. It reminds us that our stories have always been and will always be profoundly intertwined. Our journey ends not with a single discovery, but with a transformed perspective. These 20 forgotten civilizations reveal a profound truth. The medieval world was woven together by threads of trade in ways we are only beginning to comprehend. From the Sahara's desert caravans to the South China Sea's monsoon-driven ships, these societies demonstrate that influence and legacy are not always measured in towering stone monuments. More often, they are found in the subtle, persistent flow of goods and ideas across continents. The reinterpretation of these ancient networks has given voice to cultures once silenced by time, revealing a history that is more connected, more diverse, and far more fascinating than the old maps ever suggested. As we reflect on these rediscovered stories, from the Garamantes to the Sogdians, we see a clear mirror held up to our own world, a world equally built on intricate systems of exchange and deep interdependence. Let this exploration be an open invitation to look deeper, to question the historical narratives we take for granted, and to appreciate the invisible connections that have always shaped human destiny. If this journey into the lost worlds of trade has captivated you, we would love to hear which of these civilizations intrigued you the most. Share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden corridors of history.